Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar, How to Achieve Continuous Business Process Discovery and Optimization. I'm Mark Beebe, Marketing Campaign Manager for Worksoft, and your host for today's session. First, a couple of logistical points. We have a large number of people on the call today, so the lines will be muted, but we will take your questions toward the end of this 60-minute broadcast. Please use the question feature to submit questions at any time during the webinar. For questions we can't get to during the Q&A session, we'll be sure to get back to you with an email reply. We will also make a link to the recording of this webinar available for registrants who were unable to make it, or perhaps for colleagues you think might benefit from the material. Let me now introduce our speaker. We are privileged to have Jim Duggar with us today. Jim is Worksoft's Director of Technology Analytics. Over the past 20 years, he has served in a wide variety of engineering, sales, and marketing roles for some of the world's most influential and successful software companies. Today, Jim continues to bring his diverse experience to bear, helping Global 5,000 companies drive enterprise transformation with the latest process mining and continuous business process discovery technology. As a well-recognized leader in his field, he is regularly a featured speaker at industry conferences including SAP TechEd, SAP Sapphire, the Gartner Symposium, and other major events. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Jim.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this morning. I'm going to take us through a presentation on continuous process discovery and optimization and what that means both to us and what it can mean to you. And then we'll get into a brief demonstration of some technology that supports the concepts that I introduced during this presentation, and we'll open it up for questions from there. So let me first describe what is continuous business process discovery. A while back, we were working with our customers and understanding their needs, realized that there was an opportunity to be able to help customers get a comprehensive understanding of what business process was in their organization and how they depended on it and how that work got done. And so the challenge became, could we take a busy office of everyday ordinary individual contributors in the organization doing their everyday ordinary jobs and automatically turn that into a comprehensive understanding of how business process and workflow moves through the organization? What would it require technologically in order to achieve that and help our customers have a great insight into their business processes continuously at any time, automatically updated and automatically kept fresh with any change that happens in the business? And we knew from doing this kind of work manually that we had to do it without resorting to the conference room full of everybody, sticky notes and lines drawn between the sticky notes on the board and so on. That if we could automate, if we could make completely automatic this understanding of business process, we would really be onto something in terms of helping our customers stay current with their own projects for business process improvement, for testing and validation, for anything else where business process knowledge were valuable and useful to the organization. And so we committed to ourselves to not only solve that problem, but do it at such a level of fidelity that we could bring our customers an understanding of business process automatically that had such a degree of accuracy you could turn around and use that exact discovery that was created and reproduce the exact business outcome that was performed by that set of users that were doing their normal everyday tasks. Get a truly comprehensive understanding of not only the business process, but all the steps in each activity that led up to that business outcome and that business success. So I'm going to talk to you about how to be able to do that. I'm going to talk to you about how you can do it continuously and get your own insight into business process in this way. We discovered that there was really 4 primary components in order to be able to achieve that. The first concept being that of discovery, or being able to automatically understand what the end-to-end workflows were across multiple different actors, multiple different applications, and so on, and be able to do that in a completely automatic way. The second component then became visualization. With this information, how do we represent it to our business analysts and our subject matter experts and executives in the organization in a way that makes sense and allows them to very quickly ascertain exactly how work moves through the organization? Then we wanted to be able to provide analysis. What are the human factors? What are the system factors? What are the business factors that can be overlaid on that understanding of business process to gain insight into how business process affects the organization. And then finally, the insight component is being able to do that over time. How does business process morph and change in the organization as new requirements are introduced to the organization, as new regulatory constraints are introduced to the organization, as any change is introduced to the organization? How do we keep a measure of that and automatically report that to our end user? So I'm going to drill down on each of these topics and share with you a little bit of how you can achieve those things. The first concept is business process discovery. And again, we wanted to be able to do this in a completely automatic fashion and be able to do it without the traditional time and motion study or manual documentation, stopwatch and spreadsheets kinds of approaches that were used up until this moment, honestly, to get a comprehensive understanding of business process. And we realized there was two really good sources of data in the enterprise to be able to achieve that. The first is the idea of capture, being able to watch an end user do their ordinary everyday activities at the desktop and getting an understanding of what business process looks like from that perspective. The second technology is process mining, which is the use of the archaeological records and historical data stored in the database of the systems that you're concerned with, and being able to turn that into a reproduction of how the business process was performed. Both of these perspectives offer different insight into the way that business process is executed in the real world, and both of them walk hand in hand in terms of providing comprehensive knowledge about business process. The way that they work together is as follows. We think about using interactive capture with two different audiences. The first is our subject matter experts and business analysts that have, to a degree, an understanding of what the end-to-end process probably should be in the organization, and to some degree probably is. But then there's a passive component to capture that allows us to be able to have insight with all the individual contributors in the organization and get that knowledge that's only stuck in their heads, the practice experts, the activity experts that are getting the real work done day in and day out. Both of these perspectives together give you not only what it should be or the prescription of business process, but what it actually is, as really performed by real end users doing day-to-day activities. So this capture technology is half the story in that it's watching from the end user's desktop, mouse strokes and keyboard clicks and those other bits of information that are useful to get an understanding of business process, all from the end user's perspective. The process mining technology works for SAP and harvests the archaeological record out of the SAP database itself. So this has a couple of distinct advantages in that it does not require an end user or any time someone performing any activity in order to gain its business process knowledge. But it also doesn't quite have the same perfect perspective that mouse clicks and keyboard strokes will have, in that it doesn't have that perfect fidelity of how the end user actually behaved and what they actually did. Nonetheless, we can take that entire historical record that's in an SAP system, and for materials management, for sales and distribution, and for warehouse management, we can perform synthesis against that and generate a human record, exactly what the human would have had to have done in order to achieve that business outcome from that information that we mine from SAP. So both of these work together. Both of these produce very similar outcomes and very similar data and understanding in terms of business process. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of that here in just a second. And when we talk to customers about process mining specifically, they get very excited because the idea that you could use historical records to generate an understanding of how to perform business process is very intriguing. And we always get lots of questions about how and if it's really possible. So let me talk you through how that technology works at a high level before we move into the visualization. So the first thing that we do with process mining is we mine the actual data out of the SAP database. So we're going to use a transport. We're going to take a look at the real assets that have been generated by the performance of business process and the normal course of business in that system. And we're going to look at what's called the document chains that are generated in SAP. These are really the archaeological records that we harvest in order to get insight into what's going on as far as business process. We take that massive data and we do a synthesized process on it. So one of the unique positions that we're in is because we've been in the business process testing space for so long, we understand how end users interact with SAP, and we've seen literally tens of thousands of performances of business process against SAP, and we have a very keen and distinct insight into exactly how end users depend on that system. Using that information, we're able to actually recreate the necessary activities and human steps required for interacting with SAP to reproduce the exact business outcome that we've mined. So that's what we're doing in the synthesized phase there. And then finally, we take all of that step information and all those details, and we do something similar to what we do with capture data. We translate that into an understanding of the business process and the workflow that's performed by multiple actors across multiple systems, and automatically reconstruct that in Worksoft Analyze visually. And I'm going to show you what that looks like next. So that's how process mining works for us. When we visualize business process, we automatically draw the business process diagrams and business process maps that represent the actual workflows that we've either observed with capture or mined through business process mining. And you might get a picture that looks a little bit like this. This is an example from SAP. So as you can see, we have several different workflows showing different ways that orders and deliveries were created. And they all culminate in invoicing that's performed by our accounting team over here with the VFO1, or Create Invoice activity. One of the things that we do in Analyze to make this easy, and I think this is very important if you're going to do business process discovery, is the system needs to be wise to all the different variations that it has observed of business process performance. And it needs to be able to automatically detect those and automatically map these business process workflows. That's exactly what's going on here. So as our knowledge base grows and the performance of business process changes and morphs naturally as our organization changes, the system will automatically represent those deltas in the visualization. So in this particular example, we can see quite a few different ways, the different variations of being able to create orders or do warehouse shipments and these sorts of things. But it is interesting to note that our accounting department, no matter what was sold or how it was sold, was able to use an identical invoicing process to invoice the customer. And I can tell that because of what we call activity consolidation here. So Analyze will automatically figure this out for you, and will automatically plot when there's differences in performances of the business activity as detected by the screens and the fields the end users depended on to achieve that business activity, and will automatically separate or consolidate based on those differences in the system. So this is something that you get essentially for free just from having performed discovery. The other thing that our customers gave us very consistent feedback about was the understanding of documentation and detailed instructions about how to reperform business process were very, very important. In fact, many of the exercises that we're going through, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second in the insight, are simply to acquire, document, and maintain current business process understanding in a reusable system that customers can get to at any time. This business process documentation is generated completely automatically and contains not only screenshots of all the activities that the user performed, but detailed activities such as what field they interacted in, what they typed in the fields, and so on. And this is, again, completely automatic in the system. This kind of knowledge is very, very valuable for moving to the next step when you want to do things like business process optimization, business process reengineering, activity reengineering, and so on, where you need this kind of detailed information to understand exactly how work moves through the organization at the individual activity level. So with visualization behind us, let's talk about some of the analysis capabilities that are built into the solution. Worksoft Analyze can take data that it collects, such as human time factors, system time factors, execution counts, and so on, and it can also take data from external systems. These may come from ERP systems or IT systems or business systems, and we can overlay that information in the context of business process. This becomes very exciting and interesting when we start thinking about asking questions about how workflow affects the organization and what that means to the business. So to give you an example, let's go back to that screenshot that we were looking at just a minute ago with the simple order-to-cash process from SAP. You'll notice that there are heat maps or graph bars on each of the business activities, one in purple, one in orange. The purple one indicates think time. And so think time is how long on average it takes our end user to perform that particular business activity. And capture count is the number of times that we have observed it being performed by the end users. So if we look at variant number one has two activities of performing a sales order. In fact, maybe we would consider variant number 3, which skipped the first one. Then it performs a delivery, a VLO1N, and then finally we go through the common VFO1 or create invoice process on SAP. And we can see where the think time on the order and the delivery and the invoice are all very modest. Of course, so is the capture count to a degree. But if we go look at variant number 2, we can see where not only is the think time quite a bit more on average than in variant number 3, but there's also a lot more executions of it. One of the things I might want to take a look at as a business process analysis is to come back and ask, why is a less efficient process that takes more human time and is apparently longer running the primary method of execution for creating sales orders and deliveries? And maybe while I'm at it, look at variant number 4. That thing is very expensive and it's performed more modestly, but why do I even have that variant and understanding? So this is where we can go back to that business process documentation and all those details that give us exactly what's done by a plurality of end users to get a real understanding of why and where the low-hanging fruit lies and our opportunities to improve business process. Being able to surface that kind of knowledge and being able to surface that kind of identity very, very quickly is something that Analyze is very good at and that helps our customers find the opportunities for improvement in their business processes. And again, everything that you've seen so far, and I'll show you a live example of this in a second, is completely out of the box and automatic by the system. So let's take a look at what it means to take insight like we just saw into business process from an analysis standpoint and use it over a period of time. So a lot of you are probably familiar with Six Sigma methodology. This is just one example of the Six Sigma workflow. There are lots of different methodologies behind process improvement, process management, process measurement. What we aspire to do with Analyze is not pick a favorite, but instead provide you with the raw information, the raw data, and the raw insight that you need in order to be able to leverage the methodologies that make sense for your organization and drive process improvement. So I think we can see through this chat that Analyze is obvious what it does in terms of defining the opportunity, being able to discover as is business process exactly as end users perform it in the organization and have perspective and understanding of what that is. Analyze then turns around and helps you automatically measure what that means to the organization. Where are there opportunities in human performance? Where are there opportunities in system performance? Where do I have excessive rework? Where do I have excessively long-running business processes? And so on. Being able to get that kind of insight is very easy for the system. Then being able to provide the tool set for analysis and all the information that you need to do. There's not only the analysis that we have built into Analyze, but one of the things that we put into our requirements for the solution was to be able to export this information and drive other systems. Many people here probably use a solution in the BPM space, maybe an ARIS or maybe an IBM Lombardi Technologies or something like this. We can export all of this knowledge that we create and the business process models that we discover, and we're more than happy to send those over to those solutions to help you drive your re-engineering projects and drive your process improvement projects from a traditional manual business process management solution. Then being able to look at change over time. This is really just analysis with a time factor, and understand how business process changes, where new opportunities arise in the organization in terms of low-hanging fruit and process improvement technology or opportunities and so on, and being able to provide all of that information back to the organization. So this is just one example, a Six Sigma model of where Analyze can supply this data and help your organization use your existing methodologies and your existing tooling to provide better business process improvement. One of the questions we frequently get is, you know, hey, we're pretty tooled up around here. How do we help justify where Analyze is going to make the biggest difference to our organization, and where can we expect savings as a result of adding your solution to the mix? And I presented this slide to several customers, and I like the reaction that I get in terms of the nods and acknowledgement about where the opportunity lies. Analyze is very focused on business process discovery and bringing you that comprehensive understanding as fast and efficiently as possible. So if we look at a traditional method to be able to do business process improvement, we would go through the process of getting business process understanding through interviews or time and motion studies and those kinds of activities in order to understand what our end user activities were and get that perspective. What Analyze is really going to help you do is move all of that into parallel so that the actual course of collecting this detailed information, especially if you want to do it at a very large scale with something like passive capture or mining, you're getting a very high degree of information. You're going to get accuracy through aggregate, and you're going to do it in a minimum of time simply because all of that discovery and documentation is done in parallel as opposed to being done in series through traditional manual activities for business process documentation. The process of analysis, transformation, and implementation are going to be very similar in terms of total time output and human inputs required in order to achieve those outcomes. But the difference now, having moved all that discovery methodology into a concurrent workflow, is we're going to give you a return. And that return is going to be some percentage. I've seen numbers around 30% as a general rule in terms of how long it takes you to get onto your project and get the forward knowledge that you need in order to do whatever analysis, improvement, or other activity that you wanted to accomplish. So the real value here is not in that first cycle. Clearly there's some savings, clearly there's some benefit, but the real value comes at iteration. So each time now that you go through this process of identifying a new opportunity for improvement, each time you have a new release of software, each time you have a new compliance requirement for government, each time there's a new opportunity to bring innovation to market that improves the way you're able to do business, we're going to deliver that same incremental advantage. And after a period of time, what you're looking at is 4 cycles instead of 3 in a year maybe, or 5 cycles instead of 4. It is that compound interest to competitive advantage that we're looking to bring you by accelerating the way that you do business process discovery today. And of course, the accuracy with which we do it, because we're doing an actual end user monitoring or a mined process, is very, very high. And that helps with your opportunity cost to make sure that you're investing in the changes that are going to bring real value to the organization. You've got high quality measurements, high quality data to be able to understand where to invest first. Okay? So let's go take a look at a little bit of product and see what Analyze can do for you. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my workspace here. Again, we're looking at some examples from Order to Cash from SAP. We support both web applications and we support SAP. And this contains both mined processes and captured processes. To us, they're 2 sources of the same information. And so the system will automatically map out the different business process workflows that it has identified from either source. As we can see by clicking around the variant tags here, the system has automatically detected common and different business activities and included business process variations and workflows in the diagram automatically to help you diagnose all the different ways that certain business activities are performed. In fact, if I want to visualize those, by coming into and looking at all of the different business process activities that are on the screen here, I can see every user's performance of them, their total screenshots, and other details that are associated with that business process workflow. And again, this is completely automatically. This data here happens to come from our capture technology, but the system has done all the work automatically of combining and consolidating the different observances of business activities and business processes and created all the different workflows for you here. You'll notice that I have think time and capture count selected as heat maps here. And again, just like we saw in the presentation, the system is automatically showing me how often it takes end users on average to perform those activities, as well as how often they're performed. Maybe something to go take a closer look at here would be variant number 10, where we have extremely long run times. They aren't performed very often, but one might ask, why do I even have that exception case at all? And to get better insight on that, we could come up here and choose Create Documentation, and create documentation that looks maybe something like this, which I did just a few moments ago, and shows us every single interaction that typical end user in that particular business process variant had with the system, what they typed in, how they interacted with it, and so on. This sort of detail, again, is completely automatic in Worksoft Analyze. Oops, did I close my window. Oops. Apologize. We'll go back to my workspace here. All right. So we're not limited to just those metrics that we have seen so far in the presentation. You can include metrics from just about any system you can imagine, and Analyze will automatically overlay that on your business process. So what we're looking at here are several different examples that I have, including certify tests. If you happen to use our test suite, we'll do what's called coverage analysis and show you what your business processes that your real users did and how they actually performed them, and if they compare with the corresponding test and certify, meaning do I have the right coverage that I need, or do I have risk and exposures in terms of my testing versus how my end users actually use this. And so any of this kind of data that you can think of, everything from metric data coming from SAP to coverage analysis from Certify to business information that might come from the system itself showing sales data or cost information or other details that are important to you, can all be overlaid on business process and help you indicate an external metric and the meaning of that particular metric within the context of the business process workflow itself. Okay? Other things that might be interesting to you, the ability to create automation, which is a test case for our automatic or for our certified product for doing business process validation, and of course the ability to export common industry formats of discovered business processes, including BPMN and XPDL, to external systems like a BPM solution. Okay? If you'd like to learn a lot more about how Analyze works and its features and its capabilities, that's when a great demo would be a good idea, and I encourage you to reach out to your sales rep at Worksoft, and we'll set up an opportunity for you to take a deep dive into the solution and see all of its features and functions. All right, so let me return to the PowerPoint. So what we took a look at today is the ability to accelerate the discovery of business process and accumulate business process knowledge, and this works for all SAP GUI and web applications. Analyze automatically discovers your business process workflows and will automatically discover business process documentation. This helps you identify opportunities for optimization. It helps you identify process knowledge gaps quickly, and it helps you identify variants that you may not have expected, both to your benefit and detriment as an organization, of how business process is performed in the real world. This solution works perfectly along with our Worksoft certified technology, our Worksoft process mining technology, and our Worksoft capture technology. All three are supported. I'd like to close with a little quote. I thought this was very fun. And of course, someone well known in our industry.
All right, thank you so much, Jim. Now we're going to move on to some of your questions, and we've had a few good ones come in. As a reminder, if you do have questions, please submit them at any time using the question feature. Our first question, does what I capture remain secure to my company, or does Worksoft have access to my data?
That's a great question. Analyze is a cloud solution, so this information is uploaded to your private tenant space that is in our cloud. That cloud is an ISO 27001 certified data center. We maintain annual SOC and SFC 2.1 and 2 certificates. We use SHA 256 encryption for all data that's in flight and at rest in that environment. So it's a very highly secured, highly well-run data center. In fact, we contract with a third party in order to achieve that and make sure that we're in a very professional environment. As far as the specifics about access to your data, Worksoft is not interested in the specifics aspects of your data at all. We have no interest in the values that you type in those fields, the values that are interacted with in the application. We do look at workflow in aggregate, but by the time we take any peek at it, it's been heavily sanitized and there is absolutely no identifying data left in the business process information at all. So I hope that answers that question.
All right, and you mentioned that Analyze is a cloud solution. Is an on-premise version available?
We do not offer an on-premise version at this time.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about the interface between Analyze and Certify?
Yeah, the interface is, it's one that we've developed. It's basically the Certify test case is the nature of the interface. So when you export automation from Analyze and import it into Certify, what you will get is a test case that is a composite of the business process that we have discovered inside of Analyze. It might be better illustrated here with a quick picture, and let me bring that up. So let's take a look at this picture real quick and talk about what's going on. This may have been performed by someone in sales. This may have been performed by a different person in the warehouse. This was probably performed by a different person in accounting and so on. And so when we generate the automation, you will see all the different steps that each individual different user took in order to achieve that business outcome. That will be in a standard certified process format with object action that you're used to in Certify. So the nice thing here is that no single person had to know the whole end-to-end business process to be able to generate the true end-to-end business process test. That's what Analyze has assembled for us. And so now that when I go and create the test in Certify, by the time you import it in, you'll see an end-to-end business process more or less as if one single individual not only knew the whole business process, but was also able to perform it in a single session. And again, that's done for you automatically.
Okay, and as a reminder, please submit questions at any time using the question feature. Our next question, can we add descriptions to the T codes in the output?
Absolutely can. We have a comment feature that lets you document what the business activity and the business process variant both were, what they were for, add details to it. You can, of course, search and filter and manipulate these comments as your heart's content. So that's a very effective way to be able to document what's going on in the business process after you've discovered it and also be able to sort and filter on it later. The other thing that we do, you may have created a subset of business process discovery in your workspace. So we allow you to filter this stuff by dates, users, all kinds of different things. Even if the business activity is not in the workspace, but someone has commented on that particular performance, we'll surface that all the way through into your workspace. So you never lose that knowledge that has been gained about how business process or business activities are performed. The system is very smart about what we call a signature and can automatically figure out when comments are related to a particular business activity without getting itself confused, basically. We're looking at all the screens and all the different fields that the end user operates with in order to be able to make that determination. So something very clever going on in Analyze there.
Okay, our next question, how are decision points handled in a process using Analyze?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer is we don't have to deal with them because we're observing business process and we don't have insight into the decision. So let me show you how that represents itself in the business process. We're looking at what's called our multivariant view here. And what that shows us is that we have observed either mined or captured business process being performed across users that went from create order to update delivery to create invoice and finished. In this particular variation, we saw a different performance of the delivery, and so we versioned that performance and put that there. In this one, we did that right here. So we have combined this together in what we call our multivariate view because we are not privy to the decision gateway. We just know a branch condition took place. And so we do our best to consolidate this visually as much as possible to give you the most visually dense representation of all the different flows, all the different variations of business process that we have observed. That does not necessarily mean that there was a decision gateway coming out of create order here to determine which kind of delivery process to use. There may be, but we don't know exactly what that is because, again, we were observing business process. Now, when you go and you export this to XPDL or BPMN and you want to move this to a traditional modeling solution, we will, however, insert a decision gateway with a question mark under it for all branch conditions where we have observed multiple different exits from a given business activity. So the system will then reformat this from our multivariant view into a true BPMN representation ready for a solution like an IBM or an ARIS or one of the others out there, so that those decision gateways are automatically put into the business process model and representation for you. So that's a great question because it highlights one of the primary differences between our multivariant view, which is very targeted at giving you a dense and effective representation of exactly how business process was performed in the organization, versus a BPMN model, which is really more of a what are all the possible ways business process could be performed in, not observed. And so there's your difference. Hopefully that answered the question.
All right, we have a question. It looks like at the top you're using cost and select analysis overlay, and we had a question about what select analysis overlay is.
That's a prompt telling me to choose one of these other analysis if I would like to do it. So let's take a look at capture count. Okay. So now what the system is telling me is what is the average cost, and this is a metric that came from an external solution, versus the number of times that I've observed this performed. So this turns out to not be a very good example because most of the activities on here don't have both, but this allows us to do what's called a correlation analysis. So now I would go look for activities where I had a high degree of cost and a high number of executions in order to be able to ascertain what activities should I take a much closer look at in terms of reducing the cost of business process performance, whatever costs were. So if I wanted to look for the low-hanging fruit, scan the workspace visually, aha, it looks like this particular version of VA01 or create order is where I not only have a high cost, but I'm also doing it very frequently. And so if I were to make a change here that improved cost, I would make the biggest impact the most easily in the business process performance. So that's how those two work hand in hand. And you can have any two of them on at any time in the workspace.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions. How does process mining manage language dependencies?
It doesn't have to worry about it, believe it or not. By the time, we're mostly focused on the metadata that's involved in the business process performance. And since process mining is SAP only as well, we also have a very detailed database of exactly how each field interacts with each type of document chain and each type of data record that exists in SAP. And so we don't have to worry about any of the language stuff. Now your inputs will obviously be in whatever local native language that you're using for the performance of business process. As far as the workflow and the organization and the business process diagrams that you're seeing here, there's no impact to us. It doesn't make any difference to us.
Okay, and we have time for one more question. There are thousands of roles within our company. Would each person need to hand off analyze to the next person?
Awesome question. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Let's take a look at a slide that earlier I actually skipped over. So the key to answering that question is getting a sampling of the individuals in your organization and a sampling of business process executions that represent the greater whole. So the way that we typically achieve that is we'll use our interactive capture technology with our subject matter experts and our business analysts and other individuals that have some perspective of handoff between business activities and or the end-to-end or some subset of the end-to-end business process that's typically performed by the organization. But the magic happens with our passive capture technology that we'll put on the end user's desktop. And so you'll choose some subset of your end users. Typically, I like to call them activity experts. I'll choose a few in each different department. That these are the people that day in, day out know absolutely how to do sales orders, know absolutely how to do deliveries, know absolutely how to do a goods migration, know absolutely how to do the different kinds of activities that the organization depends on. And that gives us that aggregate perspective, that perspective at large that gives us enough insight and enough data to be able to make some really accurate conclusions about business process. So if we go back then to the business process diagram, understand that Analyze is going to automatically assemble this diagram for you. So you don't so much have to hand off. Analyze does all that work for you. What you have to do is have multiple different people in those adjacent roles to each other, all doing some captures, or you need to do some process mining that allows us to get some insight into those end-to-end processes. We will do the reassembly for you. That's part of what Analyze does.
All right, thank you so much, Jim, and thank you to everyone for attending. If we weren't able to get to your question, we will be in touch with more information. As mentioned earlier, we will be sending you a link to a recording of the webinar, and if you're interested in learning more about Worksoft, please visit our website. Thank you for your time today. This concludes the webinar. Have a great day.